Shabbat Shalom again, brethren. And now we are ready for the great Kahan Roya Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. It's truly an honor and a privilege to come before the called out ones this morning. I've got a few things that I want to talk about this morning, but you know, all of these books, it's like I told one priest, I kind of feel like just putting it all in a sack, shake it up, and whatever falls out, you know, we'll talk about that first. But first, let's talk about this one right here. This one is the parenting manual. How many of you have ever heard your wife say, well, this child, it didn't come with an instruction manual, you just don't know what to do next. Well, guess what? We've got an instruction manual, the parenting book. Now I'm going to do a little preview of this book. And it's coming to a table near you soon. Books a Million don't have it either. God said, Books a Million don't have it. Neither do they have anything that the information that such a great book can bring out. And I've already highlighted. You may not be able to see just about. It's terrible when I read a book with a highlighter because every time I read it and then when I go back and reread it, I gotta, I'm in a different frame of mind. I say, boy, look what you missed. And I just carry on with it. So that's one of the things we're going to go over there. The next one, I pray Pastor will put this in the marriage and betrothal. I would it was in a book form as this one to go hand in hand for society, that they could learn what marriage is truly all about. And commitments, because society today, what do they want? They want this, they don't want to get married, they want a relationship. I just want to have a relationship. Something with no commitments, So I pray that he'll put that and make it as a pair. By the way, there's a CD that comes with this, I just found out, and it's a great book. But first, I'm going to start off with the self-control book. Let me tell you, summarize just a little bit. The self-control book, when you start to read it and start to understand all the concepts in here, I have realized by reading this one and this one, after reading this one, that this teaches you how to be a proper husband, parent, and head right here. He needed this book, though, just so he could put the word parent in there in several places so you'd understand what he was talking about. But this makes you a great leader, the self-control book. And let me find my eyes, and I want to look here and show you I want to just go over one part of this since some of you won't come to class. I'm going to bring the class to you today since I got you. Since I got you right where I want you. Lock the doors. Okay. Because some people, can you believe this? I had a guy say, well, some of these classes, they're just bored. And then he goes on to tell me, well, I'm having a conflict with my wife. I said, well, if you'd come up here for a class every now and then, you'd find out how to overcome one of those conflicts. Or all of them. How many of you have ever dealt with difficult people? Just raise your hands. You people that didn't raise your hands, you're probably those difficult people. So, maybe we can deal with some difficult people this morning, huh? Self-control develops other traits. Okay. Let me get to the part. Self-control, developing self-control, this is on page 10 of the self-control book. Self-control, developing and practicing self-control will enable you to develop many other positive traits. Self-control is the foundation of all positive character. For example, it takes self-control to be a responsible person. Responsible people complete all tasks. Responsible people complete all tasks, including the task when you get married, including the task when you start having children. I got a question that I'm going to be coming up with here pretty quick, and maybe you want to think about it. So you want to get married. So you want to get married. Why? Oh, I know. It's to bring forth that holy seed, right? Okay, now what? Now you've got this holy seed. Now what? We got the answers for you. Right here. For the now what. And believe me, as we'll see, parenting is a hard job. All right. Responsible people complete all tasks to the best of their ability. They are willing to make sacrifices. Tell me when you get into one of these, and I'm going to tell you something. I hope when I get through that some of us will see what an honor and a privilege it is to marry a man or a woman in the house of Yahweh. They complete all tasks to the best of their ability. They are willing to make sacrifices to fulfill their obligations. Even if it's an obligation that lasts even into the kingdom. As the old saying, forever and a day. They make sacrifices to fulfill their obligations rather than neglecting their duties, responsibilities. Responsible people stop and consider what needs to be done. Then they make a positive choice to fulfill their obligation to the best of their ability. I want to say something here that this is what made my mind up on what to speak today. I was talking to some men, to a man, and he told me, he said, well, you know, I work and pay all the bills. I get out there and I take care of everything. And all my wife has to do is take care of the children. All my wife has to do is take care of the children. Before I go into this parenting book, let me explain something a little bit about your job and her job, based on the way this person's looking at it. You got a job that you're supplying all the food, clothing, and shelter. That job ends, you can go get another one. You get tired, you can take tomorrow off. You can fail at your job, get fired, and go get another one. There is no room for failure in a parent or mother's life with her children. There's no room for failure there. She's on call 24/7. If you don't believe that, some of you guys that go off and work, remember when Pastor, he brought up this thing, he said, you go off and teach the peaceful solution, you set the example on your job, then you come home and start a fight with your wife. I want you to think about something. You come home and start a fight with your wife. You've worked all day. Now here's your house sitting there. You come in, open the door, some clothes laying on the floor belong to the children. Books are on the table, scattered out. Your wife over there, she's feeding the baby, sitting down, taking a break. See, this is the mindset of some people. Taking a break. And you've been off all day long, working hard, teaching a peaceful solution to all these people you work for, setting this example of self-control, respect. And then you walk in. Pastor told me something here that you can use that works every time. Every time. Including for you difficult people. It works for you too. And this is what he said. You want to hear it? Every time he guarantees to work. You come home, you're tired, you've worked all day, you walk inside, and look what you see. You walk in that door, you take a deep breath, and then you just feel free to clean up anything you want to. You see those pants on the floor? You just walk over there, pick them up, fold them up, and put them where they belong. Those books, fold them up, put them in a bookshelf. Hey, men, you're the head of the house. No food cooked? Just feel free to go in that kitchen and cook anything you want to. Now, where did he tell me that? In the self-control, the respect, the self-control, the respect, acceptance. This is the books this is how he told it to me. And here's how he told me that he guaranteed to work. Remember here a while back, he said, the only way that the peaceful solution won't work in your life is if you don't what? If you don't use it. And what else did he say? If you're not going to come up here and learn it and use it and apply it, what should you do? Go to church somewhere. They'll tell you what you want to hear. You know, lies, but they'll tell you. They'll get around to something you like. Okay, so people with self-control, they're responsible people, and they fulfill all tasks. Let me go through some of this book. This book here, I don't know. One guy I was talking to, and he said, well, Con, you're just a simple man with a simple message. Yes, I am. He said, but I can tell that you're a family man. Praise Yahweh, you can see that. I love family. I love your children, and I love to teach the children, and that's why I love this book. It says on page 11. Guess what? I'm the only one with a book. If I make a mistake, nobody knows but me. Nobody knows but me. This is one time I know more than you. Okay? Maybe never again, but this is one time. All right. Parents are responsible for raising, and there's a lot that goes into that word raising, another person from the state of total helplessness and dependency to a mature adult with positive character who is responsible, who is respectful, and compassionate towards others. Negative influences can destroy a person's way of thinking and bring our children down. Our children are no exception. You know, I better make sure I get this right, though, because somebody might have to. Somebody's got the original, and Pastor probably did. But at any rate, so it is no exaggeration that parenting is a hard job. It's a hard job. And we need to think about parenting and the hard job it is before we get to this. I was amazed that when I was going through this time, I think you really need to go through this again. Even though I don't care how long you've been married, you need to go through it again, and you'll be surprised what you're seeing. I see a lot of that in this that I found in this. It says, let me go here. There are many factors that can adversely affect how children is being trained and what kind of person he or she becomes. Our knowledge, values, character, and experiences all play a role in when we train and how we affect our children. We also live in a society where we are literally bombarded with negative influences, violence, aggression, sexual promiscuity, vulgar language. Boy, you got to watch your children, who you bring them around. Vulgar language and jokes and are practically everywhere. And they come into our homes through many forms: the media, television, radio, magazines, and the internet. Let me get down to immorality. I'm going to skip a little. Immorality can be defined as a lack of morality, an immoral act or practice, not discerning between right and wrong, teaching a concept of negative behavior, doing or saying something that will bring harm to yourself or others and the environment. Let me go over to this. I'm going to skip some now and go over because of time. All right, so I'm going to skip on down to this one right here. Many of us have become parents and are unprepared. Let me tell you something. I added this part right here. At any age. See, it's not just the young people that are having children and they're not prepared. It's some of us older people who are having children and you don't know how to set the example. You don't know how to train. You're not coming to the classes, and yet you got wives and children at home that one of your obligations is to train this family to keep the peaceful solution. To train this family to be acceptable for the kingdom that's coming. But you wouldn't know that if you're a difficult person. We need all the training we can get. Yeah, we need all the training we can get. This ought to be in every home. This and this. And it ought to be, I would that everyone had to read this book before they got married. At any age. At any age. Before you get married. Because not only does this help to train your children, it also helps you to become, because some of you grandmas and grandpas, you say things and you do things in front of these children that you need this training before I bring my child or allow my child to come around you. Okay? Before I bring my son out here, I want some of you men to read this book. Because Pastor said, you're all teachers. When I bring my son in front of you, you become a teacher because he's watching everything you do. Okay? Ew. By learning how to become a positive parent, we acquire skills to raise children with a moral, respectable, caring towards themselves and others. Okay, we get on over here. I'm going to skip through real quick because I want to get into this a little bit here. And that is, it even goes into the spankers. Not spank, I put a little note up there, start with the parents first. Most of the time, when you see a child, you think, man, that child needs a whipping. No, the parent needs the whipping because it's not training the child how to act. You're setting a bad example. Oh, man, yes. Let me just put it this, here it is. It's more than meets the eye. That's part of it. Let me get a little bit, and then I'm going to go to this other book. Oh, it has great songs in there that you can sing with your children. And one thing that I wanted to bring out is the spoon technique. The spoon technique. See, now you got to make sure everybody understands the rules for the spoon technique. And you can use any other object if you want to. But in your house, now the parent has to play the game too. In your house, if you don't have the spoon, you can't talk. You got to listen attentively and pay attention to what this child or this parent say. Now you can't walk up there and start talking, you being a parent, and the son say, well, I got the spoon. Give me that spoon, boy. Shut up, man. And let me tell you, it's not going to work. No. You've got to set the example and wait your turn patiently. Parents, grandmas, if you're there at that time, grandpas. So let's go into the marriage and betrothal. So you want to get married. You know, my grandmother and grandfather were married 62 years when she died. 62 years. And when they hadn't been married too long, maybe 58 years, I think they were celebrating their 58th wedding, their marriage year. And I asked my grandmother, I was young then, I asked her, I said, what do you lay credit to all these years you've been married? And she looked at me, well, Ray, you're not supposed to get a divorce. And it kind of, she knew that. But she saw that maybe it embarrassed me or something because there's a lot of people around, And she said, well, later on, I was coming by and she said, son, let me talk to you a minute. She said, one thing that Lloyd my grandfather, one thing he never did, he never let me forget how important I am to this family. And I never let him forget that without him, we don't have a family. Okay? Before I go into this, let's turn over to and let me read this. Now, naturally, we're talking about here when the bombs come and things are set up and everything is, and everything is going great. Let's see. When I get to the other part, first I'm going to go to this one right here. Genesis 2. And let me start with 7. 2 and 7. And I'm going to just summarize it for the lack of time. Yahweh created Adam, and he breathed the breath of life into Adam. Then he goes on and he takes the flesh, and Eve also he breathed the breath of life into Eve, and Eve become a living being. And you can find that over in 21. And you go on down to 24, at the end of 24, and he shall be united with his wife in his own house, and they therefore be as one family. There was something created there also, and it was this family. Yahweh and Adam and Eve, a family come to life. It become a living thing, this marriage. And only Adam and Eve could bring this marriage, not Adam and somebody else. This particular family could only come to life with these two people. Okay? Not and this is something my grandmother was trying to get me to understand, that without Lloyd, this particular family didn't live. If she remarried, it would be another family. Okay? And we have to understand something. When we separate, when we divorce, this family ceases to live. It dies. And if you don't think this family has died, talk to the person that's trying to put things together, and you're going to find out that person's in mourning. It won't be long till you're going to tell somebody, say, this person is just like they're in mourning for something dying. His family or her family has died. And if you play a role in the destruction of this family, you're a murderer. You're killing this family that this man and woman in Yahweh has brought to life. You're a murderer. I'll go a little step further. Only the priest or Yahweh are set to counsel. If somebody calls you griping and grumbling about their husband or their wife, and you give them wrong information, I don't blame you. I'd leave him too. Boy, he treat me like that, I'm out the door. Well, if you do that, you're guilty of destroying this family. You become a murderer also, or participate in the death of that family. And this is something you need to know. And for you people that are trying to figure out who you are, here's who you are. I wanted to go into, and I don't have time because I wanted to go into how important it is to marry a man and woman in the house of Yahweh. But you have to know who Pastor is. He's trying as hard as he can to explain who he is. And in all of that, we're learning who we are in him.
Praise Yahweh.
Okay? And who we are in him is what the other scripture that I was go into, where these 7 people will come in and say, just give me your name. You think it's this old worldly name that we walk around with? No, it's not that old. It's the Hawkins name that we've took on by taking on his character, by his teaching, by sitting at his feet. And we need to understand how important and beautiful it is to marry a man or a woman who sat at the feet of the great Israel Hawkins. So at this time, if everybody would please stand, I wanted to introduce, I thought I'd never have the privilege and honor, but I do, the one and only representative of the kingdom of heaven for us today, the great Yisrayl Abel Hawkins. Praise Yahweh.
Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I was listening to the announcements about the unclean worldly soap. Everything in this world seems like it's unclean now. But I want you to know we have one of the best soaps now. The women have perfected it, I think. It even floats for you. I like it because for that reason only. But it kind of keeps the boogers away too, because of the fact that it's made of lye, gotten from ashes and so forth. And but it's white, it's creamy, makes your skin real pretty, and well, it did. Anyway, keep that in mind. There's a lot of sickness going around. This helps to fight sickness too. There's sickness in the cities, and will get worse. You can depend on that. If you know the prophecies, you'll know you better believe it. Stay out of town unless you just absolutely have to go. Don't forget the plague defense. They tell me that if you got this crud that's going around town, that plague defense, a teaspoon every hour, will knock it in a hurry. Plague defense. It's a very great thing to fight with. The Sabbath mornings in the sanctuary here, I'm being told, is really delightful because of the food that we have and drinks and coffee and friendship and coming to a place to serve Yahweh. That combination, you can't beat it, brethren. Praise Yahweh. The world, I've got to get some articles here where it seems like that the price of food, of course, is going to go up more. Gasoline has gone up tremendously. They're needing the taxes, I'm told, to build some more bombs. Experts fear Texas heading into another drought. And Texas produces a lot of food for the United States. And, of course, if drought does take over, the food prices will skyrocket because of it. Madagascar drought leaves 720,000 starving. There is enough food yet in the world, and I don't know why it's not being shared. I think it has to do with the total setup that we'll go into in just a little bit. The home values now in America fall by $1.7 trillion this year. So you can see what Revelation 6 shows is taking place. That's just a little hint that that it's here and the things that is prophesied is going to take place. And they are right now under the quartet, which was invented in 2002. Middle East faces drought threat forecast. It says, now this is the Middle East. It's in Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and northern Iran. These, right where all the bombings are going on, and I think with each bomb dropped, it's going to make this worse. The wheat prices there have jumped 46%. In Chicago, because of this, the wheat prices have jumped 46% in Chicago this year. So it affects the whole world. Whatever goes on there affects the world. Don't want to read you that one today. What we see in the world today, and of course, you should be able, most of you should be able to understand this right now, but I want the whole world to understand that there's two major plans and two major works that is taking place in the world. And nothing has ever proven that wrong. It is Yahweh's plan. He created mankind. It was His plan to create mankind in a way that He could allow mankind to suffer sins, but it wouldn't be an eternal setback to His body. In fact, He can die of these diseases that He causes to come upon Himself, or the wars that He causes to come upon Himself, and Yahweh can resurrect Him. He will have the knowledge and wisdom to know that He's the one that caused it, and of course this will help Him to not want this again. The ones that Yahweh said would receive the most guiding power to be able to guide those who don't believe at this time, but they will believe later because it was proven to them. But they will need guides and guards over them throughout all eternity. So the ones that will receive that rulership, of course, are the ones that believe now without seeing, believe the prophecies. I don't see how you could keep from believing the prophecies now, but after the next few sermons, you're going to believe them even more. You need to read the newsletters and the prophetic word, of course, along with these sermons that you hear weekly here, because I'm putting this in writing also, but I cover things that I don't cover from the stage, and I cover it in a different way in the writing. So you really need to get those articles and read them. But in Yahweh's plan, He wants to solve the problems of the universe. And of course, He's devised this plan and shows that He has, He set it forth in Genesis. He also set forth another work there, or allowed it. The tree of righteousness and evil is allowed, and He shows that in the beginning. Now, these two plans, the adversary is bringing forth the work to try to destroy Yahweh's work, because the gods do not want to see Yahweh's work develop and come and be finished because of the fact that they will lose their authority, so to speak. This is the way they're thinking. They're going to be the losers in this, but they're losers now. They just don't realize it. If you look at the world and you think of the gods in the universe, and you look at what's taking place among the nations, you'll see what's taking place among the gods. It's ruled exactly like you see coming forth from the Catholic Church today, who's managing, getting filthy rich from it, but managing the kings of the earth. And if you take a business, which you can pick any business in town, and you see they're a part of this worldly system. And of course, they're working to try to get rich or richer. And then you see the competition trying to take their business. Then you see the opposition that rises up and the hatred for the competition rising up. And of course, in this is what Babylon created. They created a great power. They said, this way, if we become strong, no one can take us over. And of course, they went to work to build this great kingdom. But it's a kingdom of competition that we see. We're seeing the final results of it now in the end days. But at that time, it looked great. And Yahweh says, by the prophets, He prophesied how His kingdom will take over. He prophesies what will take place from Genesis clear through to Revelations. He shows you this. And He shows in Genesis how He would start His work here to growing, and then each step it would take, being persecuted, killed, and so forth. He shows all of that, and He allows it. He allows it so that Satan can bring forth her way and actually prove to the heavens that he had nothing to do with their fall. But at the same time, we're seeing the nations now fight against each other, and businesses fight against one another, and how they use the municipal system to bring certain people down. I don't know if you saw it on the news this week, but they were showing that out of every 13 people that were executed. Now get this. This is your municipal system that's ruling the world, ruling the whole world. You see it in all the world. But in Rome, or in the United States, the modern Rome of the world today, you see the municipal system at work, and it's being used. And of course, if Yahweh wasn't protecting His work right now, we would be gone. It would be over, because they hate this work worse than they hated Al Capone. And they expressed that thoroughly. But then Yahweh said, in the last days, I'm going to establish this work that's going to warn you of what you're doing and the outcome of what you're doing. Well, of course, you see this, the governments today, you see them at war with one another like the businesses are at war with one another today. But with the municipal system, out of every 13 people they showed that they execute, one is innocent. Now, if you take those same figures and you look at the prison systems, why do they want a prison? Well, in the same news this week, it showed you they bring in a lot of money. Now, in today's confused world, without natural affection, the apostle said. Well, what would that mean? I can tell you what it means from what you saw on the news this week. It means they don't care who's guilty or innocent. What they care for, this man, if we can put him in prison, brings us this much money, this many jobs to our town, to our county here. This week, they're speaking of Jones County, who is crying and weeping because they've built 2 big prisons and they haven't got a cent from it yet, but they're hoping to get big money from these prisons. But the non-caring or without natural affection for your brother or your sisters, I don't know them, so why should I care? Well, this is the confused minds that we see. And why do we see it? That's what I want to get into today, is where this is coming from, where it actually started and what actually caused this non-caring. It wasn't that way to begin with. It wasn't that way when I was a child as bad as it is today. We're seeing the end results of this confusion that takes away the caring or the love. As Yeshua said, and add this to that thought right there, in Matthew 24, he said, because iniquity will abound, the love will grow cold or colder. And of course, this is what you see in the prisons today. That we had one man in this was a district attorney in Dallas who was studying to set free innocent people, and the amount of people that he set free through the DNA test was enormous. Well, lo and behold, the people attacked him and said, look at all the money you're costing our county here by doing this. Well, you see, without natural affection, the cold love, that you would think a person being of the house of Yahweh, you wonder, well, why would they hate? How can they possibly hate these people enough to lock up innocent people? Why could they hate them enough to lock them up anyway, when they're the causes of the being in prison to begin with? Because they have not taught these people the peaceful solution, character education. That's the reason they do things that are wrong. If they would teach this as Yahweh offered it to them, and Yahweh said, teach it to your children when you rise up, when you go to bed, when you set at a meal to eat, teach them this way. Well, of course, they have not done this, so their children now, they're homeless because they don't want to go home. They are unruly because they have not been taught the peaceful solution. And of course, they do things they do robberies, murders, and so forth. We'll see this in Scripture. I want you to know that the prophets and apostles actually showed this is what's going to come forth from this system. Not only just when he said to Cain, the way you have chosen here is continual war. This is what it means, but it means competition. That is a war among businesses. This week also we saw the FBI raiding some places that didn't have a franchise, or had a franchise, but it didn't cover certain garments that was sold. Then we saw certain garments that was carrying a name brand, but it was not made by the company that owned the name brand. So we saw their stores confiscated all their things, and the news person says, does this mean that you're not going to have a Merry Christmas now? Such wisdom, it makes you want to take them back to school. And of course, that's what we've got to do. We've got to take them back to school and re-educate them. But you can see this, you can see the gods here, the gods in heaven that actually are having influence on mankind. The ringleader, of course, being Satan, as Yahweh allowed, and this is what Yahweh allowed. But Yahweh inspired the prophets to show both sides of this and to give the details. And he starts it in Genesis, the detail of the false religion that sits on the 7 hills. He actually started that prophecy showing how the end results would be among the nations. But also, if you realize this, he said there's not going to be any gods left when this plan is finished. So by that time, the gods who are managing this thing, there's a time limit on them too, given in prophecy, to where they're going to wipe themselves out too. Yahweh fights no wars. He just predicts what your actions is going to bring you. And of course, the only time he ever intervenes in their affairs is when they try to manipulate or do something to his house. Sometimes he allows certain things to take place, but if it involves the work that he has prophesied, he will not allow it to take place. And he shows that down through the history of the Holy Scriptures. And everything proves the Scriptures true. There's never been anything to prove the Scriptures untrue. Even archaeology now is proving everything. Every dig, they've never found anything to prove it untrue. Well, now, in this end time now, get this, everybody, get this. In this end time, he has also prophesied a work that was started by, he would start it with 2 witnesses, he said. You are my witnesses, he said, and you'll be my witnesses to this right here. And shows we would actually witness to, that there is no other power. Well, when he says that now, he's referring to all these prophecies showing there's not going to be any of these powers left. And if you're on the other side and insist on staying on the other side, then Yahweh says you will all be consumed together. You'll be consumed together. Well, for this last days now, he prophesies along with this finishing of Satan's plan and her work. He prophesies 2 witnesses of Yahweh, witnesses of Yahweh, for these last days that will bring forth a warning to the world, and of course be hated for doing so, and suffer as he says, reproaches. The last one, the first one, he says, will be given to the curse, and then the last one will suffer, he'll give the last one to reproaches, which he did. The 2 witnesses now, in the last days, prophesied a prophesied warning to all nations. That's what they're here for. That's what this work was created for in the last days. And of course, the plan for the 2 witnesses, it was here before the earth was ever invented. Yahweh himself had the plan to bring forth 2 men, and they had to be born in a certain generation, or they wouldn't be the witnesses. Now, if you compare 2 things right now in your mind, these 2 witnesses, they had to be born in a time period when there would be nuclear burning that could actually darken the sun. There's never been a time period like that on earth. I lived to see it. In fact, in the 30s, this plan was started, called the Manhattan Project. In the 30s, a combination of powers of the United States, Great Britain, and Canada. The Manhattan Project was started in the 30s. I was born in the 30s. Now get that in your mind. First off, Yahweh prophesies the doom of this world, the way it's going, the path they have taken, the path they have chosen to take, which is continual war among the businesses and continual war among the nations, because they're all striving for the same thing: more power, more authority, more money, more wealth. That's their strife right now. And this brings forth murders, continual war, fighting, frustrations, hatred. And of course, the mind is so engulfed in money for my county, money for my business, money for my bank account, money to pay all these bills that I shouldn't have made to begin with. These are the strifes of mankind, and woe to anyone who gets in your way, right? Or tries to stop you. Don't set these prisoners free, even though they're innocent. Now, this is the love we see for this time period. Well, Yahweh prophesied that this is all going to end by their own means now. It's all going to end by them. So, Yahweh prophesied way back. And He tells you, this is going to keep up when you reject my laws. Talking to Israel, the 12 tribes, He said, if you don't keep my laws, this is how you're going to wind up. He says, you're going to invent a bomb. And this is going to bring great burning. And He said, it's going to have fallout dust, and He told you the color of it. This is all in our book, by the way, The Mark of the Beast, and another book that we wrote called The End. He gives you the color of the mushroom cloud. He gives you the color of the fallout dust. And He said, this is going to come down from heaven upon you. It's not coming from the planets, it's coming from our explosions. Now, and He says, this is going to be in this last generation. And Yeshua, when you see this bomb, He prophesied back here in Deuteronomy, when you see that taking place, which now we see it. The plan started in the 30s. I was born in 1934. I had to be born in this generation for me to be the witness. 1934. It was started in the 30s. I was 11 years old when they dropped the first bomb on Hiroshima and the second one on Nagasaki, wiping out those two cities with the atom bomb, which was much smaller than the nuclear bomb at this time, in strength, I mean. But we had to come forth together. The two witnesses that He prophesied would warn the world, and the bombs which can destroy and are going to destroy, Yahweh says, the world with a great burning. People survived, some people survived, being a long distance from those two atom bombs. But this time, what we're facing right now and what's going to come very soon is a horrible thing, but it's going to prove with no uncertainty at all what this way of life will bring. That He said to Cain, what you have brought, what you have chosen, this competition that you have chosen here, because Cain looked upon Abel as a competitor, and he thought if he killed him, he could have it all. He could have it all and have it his way. Well, of course, there's always those that come after. Now, this in no way, this thing that took place, this in no way changed Yahweh's mind. He started in Isaiah 1, telling about Yahweh's about the 12 tribes' sins. Let's go back to Genesis, and showing how that they had turned to the gods. This was the 12 tribes. We'll get to that in just a moment. But the 12 tribes. But look over here to Genesis 1. You've got to keep this in mind here, His plan. Genesis 1:26, He says, I'm going to make man in my image. That's the ones that will allow Him to make man in His image. Now, Yeshua said that many will come, many are chosen, but few are actually going to endure until the end. That's the thing you've got to do when He calls you. A lot of people come, but for a lot of reasons, they leave. If you remember how many left Yeshua, they came by the thousands because the word got out. Here's the man. Here's the man we've been looking for in prophecy for all these years. So the word got out. Well, here they came to Yeshua. And then they all left Him. all but 12, the 12 disciples. Well, of course, after his death, and the work went forward speedily and showing that he fulfilled these prophecies, then, of course, they went to adding to the house of Yahweh again. But a lot of them left the disciples too, but they took things with them and spread it. So the word never stopped being spread. But here Yahweh's plan is revealed to you and those who will humbly submit to let him make you into his image by going to, of course, the place he says, I choose to place my name, and there humbly submitting like a child to the priest who will teach you what you must do and what you must endure to get through to the end. He doesn't judge you on how much you overcame. He judges you by the whatever zeal you put in to trying to overcome. That's what you're judged on. In this same garden now, plan here, we see the two together here in chapter 2 of Genesis and verse 9, the tree of righteousness, total righteousness. And then we see going over to Isaiah 1, we see the plan of righteousness and evil, which you see in the Catholic Church that sits on the 7 hills of Rome. You see less today being taught from that church than you did in the days of the priest. But they didn't keep the laws even in the days of the priest of Jerusalem. They didn't keep them. Well, here in Isaiah's time, now, this was 760 BCE, 760 years before the Savior who was prophesied in Genesis to come and die on a prophesied place at a prophesied time. 760 years before he came, and Isaiah was saying in the first chapter here, "O sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers." They're the children of those who he brought out of the land of Egypt. Don't think that those people are lost by any means. They're all in Yahweh's plan, and one day you'll resurrect them and teach them for 100 years. Most of them were not called at all, but they had the opportunity, of course, but they were a stiff-necked and rebellious people. And Yahweh said this over and over. No one seemed to believe it. They don't believe it today, you know. They think them Jews are over there in Israel keeping Yahweh's laws. They couldn't be further from the truth. They never kept it. Never kept it. The only ones that actually kept it was the ones that was born in Galilee and brought up in Galilee and in that area and taught by the house of Yahweh, the called priest of Yahweh, the holy prophets of Yahweh. They kept the laws of Yahweh. The ones that took over Jerusalem were not those holy prophets. But Yahweh let them come forth saying through Moshe, I know that this group is a stiff-necked and rebellious group, but I'm going to let you take them on in and possess this land, and Yahweh's will be done, which they all killed Yeshua, the Savior, for us, of course. If he hadn't died, our sins wouldn't be forgiven. He paid for our sins. But you're the seed of these evildoers, children who are corrupters. They have forsaken Yahweh. Now this is talking, if you look back to the verse 1 there, to Yada and Jerusalem. He is speaking to them. And they also said in Acts, if you'll turn over there, now this was the great apostle, the apostle Shaul speaking here in Acts 20. Acts 20. And notice verse 29. He tells you what is going to take place here. Acts 20, in verse 29, he says, "For I know this, that after my departing, after my departing. Now, Shaul's work was done, much earlier than Yochanan. But the writings that he produced for us today gives a great deal of prophecy, but they give a great deal of history of the activities of Yahweh's people that brought forth Book 2 for us in the land of Galilee. Yes, that's where it was written. That's where the work was done, in Galilee. And they were always working in hiding. Everything that the Pharisees found out about, they sent soldiers like the Apostle Shaul out to kill them. And of course, ones that were willing to kill. Shaul would have kept up the killing of Yahweh's people, had Yeshua not converted him, proving he can convert anyone he wants to. He could do that right now, but Yahweh's plan wouldn't be proven if he did that at this time. Well, here now, in Acts 20, in verse 29, he says, "For I know this, that after my departing, grievous wolves will enter in among you, not sparing the flock." If you compare that to Genesis 49, these people own Jerusalem, this tribe right here. They and Levi owned Judah, Yada. They owned Jerusalem at that time. And that the Apostle Shaul was speaking. And here the prophecy shows, for the last days. So Yeshua was showing what was going to take place from his death on. If you notice Genesis 49, verse 1, "Come and I'll show you what's going to take place among the 12 tribes who will take over, multiply, and become a multitude of nations." A multitude of nations. But then that's where it ends. Because now they've become the multitude of nations. Now there's no other place to spread. And what do they say? We've got to kill so many. The earth has to be depopulated. This was what Bill Clinton said. And he made the statement because somebody else told him that. So the thought is going around that the earth must be depopulated by the year so-and-so, by this number, in order for us, the important ones, to survive. I'm not speaking of myself. That's the way they think. They're the important ones that are making the decisions to get rid of so many people on the face of the earth by the year so-and-so. Otherwise, they can't survive. Well, see, the earth is filled now. They've become the multitude of nations. They've taken over the earth with their government. Now, there's no other place to spread. There's no new lands to go to. We have it all occupied. And we can't live with one another with the cold love that we're seeing here. We could easily live, but not their way. Well, here in Genesis now, the first verse, it shows the last days. Remember, Yeshua, the Apostle Shaul said, grievous wolves, the grievous wolves will enter in. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf. In the morning, he devours the foe, and in the evening, he divides the plunder. This is war, of course, that he is forecasting here would take place. This is a prophecy, and he said, after my departing, this is going to start taking place. And of course, we saw the crusades start coming. Now, if you go back to right there, you're close to it, Yochanan 1, you'll see now, and keep this in mind as you study, you'll see the plan of Yahweh, and this is what the Apostle Shaul said was in the plan of Yahweh, to let Satan and the gods, who they worship as, in Revelations, hold your place there in Yochanan, go over to Revelations 9, and you'll see these gods. Remember, Satan said, go ahead and sin. You won't surely die, but you'll be like the gods, knowing both righteousness and evil. And of course, that's what the world has done. They've accepted that way. And here in Revelations 9 now, if you have Yochanan 1 and Revelations 9 now, he says the rest of the men who were not killed by those plagues, he's talking about a third part of man being killed over a fourth part of the earth in and around the great river Euphrates, where we see all the commotion of the nations right now taking place in that fourth part of the earth. So the prophecy is definitely at hand right now. The witness is here warning what is going to take place. The end result of what you're doing is going to take place. And the bombs are here that Yahweh said could darken the earth. Are you still a disbeliever even after all of that? I've got more to show you that'll make you sick at your stomach, but I'm going to show you anyway. But he says after this third part of man is killed over this fourth part of the earth, they still, verse 20, the rest of the men who were not killed by these plagues still did not repent of the works of their hands, that they should not worship demons. And he's speaking of the gods that work for the silver, the gold, the brass, and so forth, that bring forth the wealth. Then Revelations 18, the first 10 verses, shows the great city that sits on the 7 hills of Rome that guides the kings of the earth, bringing this great wealth, and all of it being burned with nuclear burning. Well, back now to Yochanan here, 1, and he says, in the beginning was this plan. This plan that you see spoken of here, and what Shaul is speaking of, after my departure, so grievous shall the grievous wolves enter in. After his departure, that was the last work until the last days. The only work that was finished after that one was that of Yochanan, who wrote this book called Revelations, showing Yahshua's coming and the short work that would take place during the time of the 2 witnesses. That was written in about 80 to 85. His other work there in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Yochanan was in the 60s, I believe, and then about 85, his work was finished. And from that time, it was crusades all over the world trying to attack holiness, anything that was holy. They were trying to attack it as Cain did. All the world has gone the way of Cain, as this Yochanan said, who also wrote Revelations. All the world has gone the way of Cain. So this is what he was referring to here, fulfillment of prophecy. So in the beginning, Yochanan 1:1, in the beginning was this plan that you see from Genesis clear through to Revelations, which ends with 2 men called the witnesses, who warned the world and are hated for their warning. The same plan, verse 2, was in the beginning with Yahweh. All things were done according to it. All things were done. He allowed the 12 tribes to choose. And he says to you today, you must choose. You must choose either to endure or quit. One of the two. Just endure or quit what you're doing and go. All things were done according to it, and without it, nothing was done that was done. In this plan was life. He offered life, of course, eternal life, which you don't get unless you do keep it. Now let's go over to Isaiah 2, because here is where he says, after telling in Isaiah 1 how Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, had turned to sin and sickness and disease. They become murderers, no judgment, a faithless city. And here he says, but in the last days now, in the last days, for the word of Isaiah, this is Isaiah 2, verse 1, the word that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Yada and Jerusalem. It will come to pass in the last days that the promotion, the mountain, the uplifting of his work, of the house of Yahweh, will be established in the chief of the nations, and will be raised above all congregations, and all nations will flow to it. Now, in each one of these prophecies where I've brought forth Yeshua, the righteous man raised from the dead, and the work that he has laid upon the donkeys in the last days, the branch and the donkeys he ties to them to do the work, every one of them shows the same thing, that it's going to go forth a warning to all the world. Speaking of the two witnesses, this is their work in the last days, first to establish a house, as we see also in Zechariah 4 and 5, establish a house that will have the means and doors open to them to go to all nations. Think of what a miracle that is, brethren, that we're now going to all nations. Any place on earth. Any place on earth can pick us up right now, and the same warning is going out to all the world. He says, the chief of the nations, and will be raised above all congregations, and all nations will eventually, what is left of them, is what he's speaking of, because you've got to put this in with the rest of the prophecies. And this doesn't take place till Revelation 7 takes place. And the fifth of mankind that is left of the nations will make their way to the house of Yahweh. And many will come out of tribulation at that time, this great tribulation, he said. Many will come out and come to you. They're coming over to you, he said, over the ocean to you. And let us go up to the mountain, the promotion of Yahweh, to the house of the father of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways. He will teach us his ways, notice, meaning it wasn't taught before. That's the reason in the last days he had to establish his house, because his ways was not being taught for almost 2,000 years. After my departure, the grievous wolves will enter in. But in the last days, then he shows you who the grievous wolves are. They're the multitude of nations that has come from evil doers' seed to now, with the same breeding of Cain, the same character of Cain, and it's slowly grown worse. For that 2,000 years, wiping out, of course, and making making the laws of Yahweh, and anyone who taught them, either killing them or making them look sick or evil, bringing dishonor upon them. Grievous wolves, he said, which was shown to us from the ones who actually control Jerusalem, the grievous wolves who have moved to the 7 hills of Rome and so forth, will walk in his, he says, the nations then will teach us his ways, and we will walk in his paths. Never before has this occurred, but it will occur this time. For the law will depart out of Zion. It's going to leave Zion, as Yeshua said. The time is coming to the Samaritan woman. He said, the time is coming when the Father won't be worshiped here at all. Not here or in Jerusalem. Not in these mountains nor in Jerusalem. For in the last days I will establish my house in the chief of the nations. Zechariah said it was a Babylonian land not yet established, which was Oklahoma, where I was born. The United States was only discovered in 1492. Wasn't discovered when Isaiah was speaking. Wasn't discovered for several hundred years after that. For the law will depart from Zion, the word of Yahweh will depart from Jerusalem. He will judge among the nations. Well, how does he do? How does he judge among the nations? It's got to go forth the warning to the nations. And then how they accept that warning, they're going to be judged for that. And those who accept it and believe it, yes, they will have a place with us. And will rebuke many people. They will beat their swords into plowshares. You've never seen that before. And they won't learn war anymore. Well, that's his promise for the last days. Also in the last days, now we see the sun darkened. We see a means of darkening the sun is what we see. An invention of mankind. The works of man's hands, as we just read in Revelations 9, verse 20 and 21. We see in the last days, along with the work of Yahweh, the two witnesses now. This establishing his house was shown to be by two witnesses. That also is shown in Zechariah that I brought out. We'll probably do it again. Zechariah 4 and 5, chapters 4 and 5. The warning against Babylon. Let's go to Isaiah 13 now. Isaiah 13. And remember this, when you see this word Babylon, Babylon means confusion. So the warning against this confusion that was created by Cush, called the schools of Nimrod, which went out from city to city and establishing these schools on every high hill and so forth, and following the demons or gods, as Revelations 9 shows. But this burden against Babylon, or against the confusion that is coming forth from a way you're following, which Isaiah, and remember in Revelation 17, it shows you the end result of Babylon. The Babylon mystery. And the mystery that no one knows what they're teaching, no one knows what they're doing behind closed doors, but Yahweh showed in advance what they're doing. He says, in the mystery against Babylon, the burden, he says, and the burden against Babylon, which Isaiah pronounced. Isaiah, the son of Amos, pronounced. He says in verse 2, lift up a banner upon the high mountains. Raise your voice to them. Wave your hands so they may enter the gates of the called out ones, giving them a chance to come to the house of Yahweh. Where Yahweh said, like in Deuteronomy 12, go to the place where I choose to place my name, and there go to the priest, and they will teach you what you must do. Well, what you must do, of course, is humble yourself, become as Yahshua himself in keeping the laws. That should be your number one desire right now, to copy that man. Yahshua, you can't get better. To the called out ones, and look on down to verse 9 there. He says, behold, the day of Yahweh comes, terrible, both with wrath and furious anger. This is mistranslated, but it shows what is going to take place with the sinners anyway. Among the nations, to lay the land desolate, and he will destroy its sinners, destroy the sinners from it. Well, of course, we see from Revelation 7, we see a protection that is actually developing right now from the people in the nations where this message is going. And there are people that is hearing this message, and they're looking in their Bibles, and they say, hey, this man is right. You know, this is what the law says. This is what the prophecy says. Well, you see that protection then from Yahweh, because Yahweh shows that these people are protected. He starts this protection from taking place where they won't be killed by the plagues that are taking place in that fourth part of the earth. Have already started in that fourth part of the earth. So here the prophecy is to warn them of the destruction they are bringing on themselves, to destroy the sinners. So it's the sinners that Yahweh shows won't have any protection from Him. And of course, without His protection, they are going to suffer the plagues, as Yahweh says in Revelations. How do you come out? Of course, you repent. I'll throw that in quickly because we're a long ways from finishing this. But right now, I want you to see the warning, the prophesied warning of doom that Isaiah said would go out to all nations in the last days by the house, by two witnesses, so they would know from one end of the earth to the other. Isaiah described this work of Yahweh, that a great burning is going to take place. But why? Why warn them? Why warn them? Why at this time would He have to send out a warning? We have Bibles all over the country. I think there's probably a Bible in every home in the poorest parts of the world. Gathering dust. Normally, that's the way it is in this day and time. Because the 7 hills of Rome have brought forth in the last 2,000 years the fear. You're in danger. First off, they paint a picture that if you try to follow the laws of righteousness and you don't join in their revelry as their sin, as one of the apostles said, they think you're strange. And they put out the word that you are strange. Now, back in the days of the witch hunts, when the government's allowed, they would actually tie you to a stake and burn you. These are just a few of the tortures that they took delight in. Yes, they actually took delight in torturing and killing people. And they brought forth this attitude in the people's minds that if you own a Bible, if you don't eat pork, if you tried to keep the Sabbath day, that was a no-no after, of course, Constantine made it a law, a penalty of death for keeping the seventh-day Sabbath. And of course, Constantine was a pope and a murderer. He murdered so many people, it's pitiful. But now they worship him as a dead saint, and they pray to him. And he's one that's supposed to intervene on your behalf. Of course he don't. He's dead. He knows nothing. And he will remain dead until you resurrect him. But keep in mind now, because of the confusion of the mind, they cannot understand righteousness at this time. They could read their Bibles. It means nothing to them. Someone has to point out that the fourth commandment actually means what it says. You have an appointment on the seventh day of every week with Yahweh Himself. Oh, on the seventh day. Well, why didn't I ever notice that? You mean it's not the first day? No, this is a day that Constantine says you must worship the sun. Not the Son of Yahweh, but the sun that shines down on you. You know where that worship came from? From Egypt. His birthday of this God was December the 25th, and any encyclopedia will tell you that's the reason Christmas was celebrated, not because it was the birthday of Yeshua, but because it was the birthday of the sun god. And Sunday is the God's day. Instead of seventh day, the appointment with Yahweh, pass that up. Go play around on that day. But on Sunday, come and worship the sun with Constantine. Well, no one would know that unless you told them. But that's only the beginning. the rest of the confusion is so deeply set in the minds of the people that sometimes it takes years, but Yahweh shows that He has opened up a new inspiration in these last days, and a quick work, He says, is going to be performed. Well, that quick work is the individual attention that He's going to give to everyone who, He says, hears this message and repents to Yahweh. Repents, and starts finding Yahweh's house. That He's going to start working with those all over the world, He says, and He will bring them to His house, and they will start keeping the regular appointments as commanded back in Genesis, laid before them. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next speaker. I love you.